Well, roll call, Deb?
Excuse me. Mayor Campbell,
Here.
Vice Mayor Semaglia,
Here.
Commissioner Daley,
Here.
Commissioner Carter,
Present.
City Manager Goodrum,
Here.
City Attorney Hearn.
Here.
Thank you.
Will we have a moment of silence, please? All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. How about our two chiefs leading us? One nation, under God. Okay, do we have any public comment tonight? No signed speakers?
Vice Mayor, sorry. We have not received any written requests.
None? Okay. Are there anybody that want to, is there something, you want to speak, sir? Yeah. Yeah, come on up.
Name and address.
Give us your name and address, please.
Okay. The reason I'm speaking is that I disagree with the 6% millage rate increase that was approved for the trim notice.
Excuse me, sir, may I please have your name and address for the record?
I'm sorry. Warren Gillis, 8330 Northwest 51st Manor, Coral Springs, resident, voter, etc. I'll start over. I disagree with the millage rate, 6% millage rate approved for the trim notice. It makes the residential property in the city more unaffordable. And also because the commission, excuse me, has not set a strategic goal of keeping the city affordable. The goals you have set are about polishing a city. And that's where a family with a $78,000 income cannot afford to buy the median-priced house. In terms of polishing, it requires general fund revenue increase and expense increase. And one factor that affects the general fund is the cost of living. The appraiser increases revenue by applying a cost of living factor to assessed values. But the commission does not apply annual cost of living adjustments to fines, fees, and service revenues it controls. Fiscal year 2019, fines and forfeiture revenue declines 13%, and Parks and Recreation user fees decline 3%. The traditional mantra that's used to defend a rate increase is that services have to be cut if the increase is not approved. But in the past, this commission has eliminated initiatives, and that's not eliminating expenses. The result is the commission has passed avoidable expenses for approved activities to the taxpayers. My opinion is that the commission tonight should address avoidable line item expenses for departments such as development services, police, and parks and recreation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else that would like to speak?
Mr. Vice Mayor, I would just note that public hearing, public comment you've now closed. There's opportunities at each hearing to discuss, but for Mr. Gillis, I think you're really addressing the millage rate, so we'll make sure your comments are in the millage rate portion of the minutes as well.
This is the first budget presentation by Catherine Gibbons. Catherine?
Thank you, Vice Mayor, and welcome to the first public budget hearing for the 2019 budget. While we use the term first budget hearing, this in no means that we have been a part of this process that started back in. So when we look at the 3 workshops that we had on strategic planning, when we set the initiatives, then we had an additional 2 workshops on budget hearings, and here we are today. So there has been a lot of information in here that you have already seen before and you're quite knowledgeable on. At the same time, we'll still go through it just for those that are behind me and in the public, and we'll move forward. And after my presentation, at that point, I'll hand it over to City Attorney John Hearn so he can read the resolutions and the ordinance. Let us start with where we are in this fiscal year. We have 12 business days left in this fiscal year. This slide illustrates the general fund revenue projection. I won't go through it all, however, let's look at a couple of the highs and lows. Any of the projections for the overall 100% for revenues is favorable for revenues here. So we kind of go over 101, that is franchise fees, we're up with FPL. On the downside with intergovernmental, this is where we capture our communication services tax, which we are down $710,000. So that is a lot of landlines that are being shut off. And the providers, the cell phone providers are starting to really cut out of that particular tax. So that is part of the reason for the driver going down. Recycling revenue is also in that category, which is going down. We have on the upside with licenses and permits, our building permits are up. Parks and Recreation on those are some of the fees that we have for promotional items and memberships, that is down. When we look at general government, that is City Hall and the Mall doing quite well. And in public safety and EMS, we do receive an EMS grant, and that is captured there, as well as our PD off-shift filing fees go here. And then we have the fines and forfeitures, and that's code at 120% over. Now, to sum up this slide, city staff has forecasted revenues within 1% of a $125 million budget. This is not done by accident. This is not coincident. This is a lot of hard work by not only my staff, but staff throughout the organization. They are the ones that are having to look at the trends for if you register for a sport, if you are filing for a permit fee, a permit for your driveway, for your kitchen, looking at EMS transport fees, looking at if you park in a handicap spot, at that point that's a fine. Cutting off landlines, all of those things go into our revenue forecast. So 1% is good. Next. I mentioned code. We've gone through a recession that started back in 2008. And as you can see in the peak of the forecast on the foreclosures, it occurred in May 2010 with 4,500 homes being affected. During this time, the city needed to act. When the city acts, at that point, that's when we increase our expenses. We look at we have to enclose swimming pools, we have to seal doors, windows, and things like that. That does come with city expenses. So at that point, the city expends money out. Now you kind of see it coming down, and that is during recovery. That is when we're seeing that the times are getting better. And at that point, then a byproduct of this is the city receives revenue back as people are selling off their properties and making it better. So when I talk about the overall code revenue, we're seeing that this is now exactly what we're wanting it to be. We're having people in their homes, and at that point, then now this revenue is now leveled off, just as we have people in their homes in Coral Springs. So that's what we're aiming for. All right. Next are expenditures. I look at them as departmental and total non-departmental. You don't really want to get into the weeds of looking at each department to saying, good, bad, or, where are they in their projection of budgets, because a lot of times it's out of their control. But at the same time, it is still within their control. So whenever I look at this, I say, if they're within 1%, they're doing a great job. They're passing my test all day long. So when I look at total non-departmental at 99%, again, that's 1% within a $125 million budget that they're meeting. I think it's doing, very, very well. The fact that we're under 100%, that means we're saving money and we're going toward an operational surplus. So where does that leave us with our reserves? Here's a snapshot of our reserves and the preliminary 2018 forecast and the impact of Hurricane Irma without the awaited reimbursement from FEMA is located. So what does it look like? In 2017 and 2018, you can see before Irma happened in 2017. Then 2018, we know that we're going to have to act within our reserves. I'm going to flip to the next slide, and we'll talk about that. So in 2018, the year-end projection, Hurricane Irma cost $9.8 million. About $3 million of that was expensed out last fiscal year. Those are the salaries, that was some of the debris and equipment. Equipment. Now, for this year, that is when we received the bill, let's say, for the majority of the debris and building damages. That came to $6.8 million. Well, how much do we think we're going to get back? $9.6 million. But again, how do we pay for that 6.8? We look at the operational projected surplus that we just talked about. That is going to go toward it. That's $2.3 million. So where do we have the year-end deficit at this point? That's 4.455. Now, we also have the 2017 unassigned reserves at 1.9 million. We have that we were going to budget reserves at 2.4 million. That will go toward it. And again, we have our year end. So what will be subtracted from stabilization fund? 45,000. Now, this is all before we have our auditors come in. At that point, some things come in, some things come out, but this is just an overall ballpark estimate on what we're looking at projection to be. So when we ask ourselves, what should the stabilization fund be for 2018, kind of move over to the other side, that's $21.8 million. We know we still have a shortfall, and that is right under 700,000. So again, what's our plan for whenever we do receive the Irma reimbursement at 9.6 million? What's the plan? Is to replenish the stabilization reserve shortfall, replenish the fire fund, water and sewer fund from the Irma expenses, and then we're going to reserve funding for capital expenditures so that we can avoid issuing debt. That is the plan. I also just want to state for the record that the city has already opened a $10 million open line of credit for 18 months. This protects us for 2 different hurricane seasons, as we expect that the money from FEMA will be coming to us within that time. All right. The City of Coral Springs budget overview. The total taxable assessed value is still increasing. It's been increasing over the past 7 years, and we are still in recovery from 2008 at 10.39 billion to 10.28 billion. And the city also seeks grant opportunities as an additional revenue source. And as you can see, the year-to-date grant summary. Kudos, I'll say, to Kristen Holowicki in the budget and strategy team. And thank you very much to those departments that also utilize her and look through grants throughout the year. It takes a lot of time to explore $21 million worth of grants, and I think our city does a fine job of making sure that we can try to capture as much dollars through our grants as we can. And this is the 2019 budget proposed highlights that we'll begin walking through. This slide illustrates the fire assessment comparison for the local cities with the full-service fire departments. This is probably the first time you're seeing the comparison with the other city comparisons on here, just because tonight is the first night that a lot of cities are doing their budget hearings. So this is some of the comparative data that we have from the other cities. Just kind of getting back and looking at the chart, we are back in the second to lowest assessment cost for the excellent fire service that we provide our residents and businesses. Next is for those interested in the fire assessment chart for the different categories. You can look at this. And several areas to highlight with the increase of services are the adds to staff, the continued focus on firefighter safety and health, and several of the capital requests are listed below. Next is the residential solid waste assessment. We are, when we kind of look again at the assessment in other comparative cities, we are in the same kind of slot, shall we say it, as we have been in previous years. And they range, the range of level for service is very different throughout, but that is solid waste. If you're asking what the increase is due to, it's the increase with CPI, the cost of processing recyclables, and the increased cost of disposal cost. All right, moving on to the 2019 Water and Sewer Fund highlights. No change from prior years in methodology for our water district. We are still utilizing the water and wastewater rate study back from 2013, when they recommended a 3.5 rate increase. What does this mean in terms of dollars? It's $2.32 per month. Continuing on with capital. We did want to highlight some of the continuing improvements throughout the city, utilizing the city's operational funding and that of the Tree Trust Fund. So you can see the projects listed below: the environmentally sensitive lands improvements at $75,000, the Artilio roads, the tree subsidy program, and of course, median improvements. All right. This slide highlights some of the enhanced services that our community will experience in 2019. I'm going to pause here. Okay. And this is just a snippet of it. There is a full book on the proposed annual budget. If you ask me what my favorite book is right now, this is it. This is what I'm reading every single day. So hey, pick it up and read it. There are pictures in it. There are charts in it. You know, it's just not all words and numbers. So check it out. It's on our website for anybody that wants to take a look at it. Our 5-year forecast. The city's financial stability was truly one of the main focus areas that we concentrated on during the budget creation process. Again, you don't have to look at all the numbers on the slide. However, go down to the bottom, and as you can see, the 5-year forecast, if the recommendations are implemented and no unfunded mandates and sudden changes in forecasting, the city has a positive 5-year forecast. I'm somewhat waiting for applause. No? Applause? 5-year forecast positive. Okay, I can't win, but I can. Okay, the next is, let's talk about some of those budget assumptions and recommendations. The goal is to continue with enhancements in the city and to create a more sustainable financial future. So in 2019, what we focused on is slowing down the cost escalations. Revenue growth is around 2.8%. That was somewhat of our marker. And then at that point, we are going to continue with merit increases, but at a rate that we can afford. We're going to manage our vacancies, and we are going to be moving to a 90-10 cost share with our healthcare, with the city and its employees, and with a goal of 80-20 in 2023. We're going to encourage employee focus groups for many things, some of which are innovative programs to bring that up and continue with that. And look at the contracts that we have. At that point, try to keep those increases as low as we can. We do fund only 25% of our capital requests. That's something that we're going to still need to have to look at and form a plan around that and stabilization with our reserves. In 2020, some of the plans are to adopt a stormwater assessment that many cities in Broward County do leverage. And we're also looking at, in November, if the homestead exemption does pass at that point, the next fiscal year, then we would offer and propose an equivalent millage rate, as the homestead exemption would impact our city by $3.2 million.
Catherine, if we can stop for a second, because I
Yes.
think that's a very important point that for everyone who's in the audience and anyone who may find this video later online or on Coral Springs TV, you have an opportunity this November to vote on an additional homestead exemption. Whether or not it actually applies to your property is something you should certainly keep in mind, because if you just blindly vote yes, as you can tell in the documents in front of us and on the screen, that's going to literally rip $3 million out of the budget of the city of Coral Springs. And that's $3 million that will need to be made up. You're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars across the state of Florida for municipalities. This is a legislative bait and switch. This is their ability to say, look, we gave you an additional exemption. Look at us. We're lowering your taxes. And you're forcing cities to turn around and increase taxes to make up for that lost revenue. So please keep that in mind as you vote in November. And if it should pass, please keep it in mind as we go through future budget cycles, because it's going to be a $3 million impact to our budget. Thanks, Kevin.
I think the worst part is that, you know, the state is going to be the hero because it's a tax break in their language, but in reality, it is a tax shift. I think that's where the cities and residents are going to be hurt. It's not going to be a positive.
And in outlying years, I think the concept of this is just, we need to be keeping up with inflation. All right. So what the city is proposing is we propose to maintain the current millage rate at 5.8732. This does give the city $3.3 million in revenue. This increases from the increase in property values. State law requires 2/3 vote to keep the millage rate exactly the same. Again, that's what we are proposing. However, any millage rate above the rollback rate being 5.5366, will be advertised as a tax increase. Again, the city commission, at this point, when we're talking with them, we are proposing to maintain the current millage rate.
If I can jump in again, just to clarify for anyone in the audience and anyone that may see the clip, as you heard Catherine mention, this is another legislative trick, and everything we do, short of accepting the rollback rate, we have to advertise a tax increase. So generally, property value increases are a positive, right? Everybody views property value increases as a positive. Unfortunately, in this scenario, any increase in property values, even at the same millage rate, has to be advertised to the public in the newspaper as a tax increase, even though we have not changed the millage rate, and it's simply because there was an increase in property values. So it was the legislature's way of forcing local government's hands, saying you will advertise a tax increase or you will adopt a rollback rate, which, by the way, would cut $3.3 million from our existing budget.
Megan, did you want to say something?
Mayor side.
Okay.
Right. Moving on to the next slide, the operating millage rate comparison. Again, this is a time where you can look at the other cities and what they are proposing. You can see our 2018 actuals and the proposed for our city right in the middle. And I will say, kind of looking at it real quick, 8 of the 10 cities shown are increasing their millage. On to the next. So what's the impact on the average single-family home? For keeping ad valorem, it will rise as property values do go up. At that point, people are going to see an increase in their taxes. It will be to the tune of $62.24 a year. That trickles down to $5.19 per month. How much of your tax bill goes to the city? We talk about this a lot because when people get the trim, they think it is all going to the city, and it is not. 34%, the largest piece of the pie, do go to the school board, and then only right under 30%, I hit it at 30%, goes to the city. And then you have Broward County at 27%. So when people say all of my tax bill goes to the city, at that point, that's when we do clarify. Another way of looking at this is if my home is in Coral Springs and let's say that same exact home is in Miramar, I am paying $396 more per year for that house just being in a different city. So I look at ourselves and say, you know, what's the city up from that? That is Sunrise. You'd be paying $20 more. You can kind of see what assessments they have, and you can kind of look with a ruler to see kind of how much each of the assessments are. Another way of looking at it is looking at it per month to say, you know what, how much of my bill is going to the city versus what would I pay for electricity, for my phone, for my TV. You can kind of see how it's broken out that way. So at this point, I'd like to thank my staff for all the work that they have done. I'd like to thank the fellow department directors and their staff for going through this entire journey. Thank you all for your input. This has been a great budget process. At this point, the next meeting is the second and final budget hearing set for Thursday, September 20th at 6:30 in Chambers. Questions?
I jump in again. These last few slides are particularly important, and I think they're particularly important in light of everything that's been going on in the public for the last year and a half. If my colleagues are open to it, and if staff thinks it's something that would be helpful, maybe we should put together an informational video, something that actually pinpoints how much of your tax bill goes to the city, what the same home pays in another city, understanding how your taxes work in terms of where the dollars are going. helpful, and it would help us get the message out that this is actually the breakdown, if that's something you're open to.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, is there some way that we can put this in our next publication of Everything Under the Sun magazine that goes to every household?
Nodding your head, yes.
Get it to Liz, and
Okay.
let's try to do that. What do you think?
In addition, if we can look at the video or social media option, just because, I mean, granted, we'll be through, I'm assuming the next edition of the magazine is going to be after budget season, so I could be wrong, but I think it just came out a couple weeks ago, so if we can expedite it, that'd be great.
All for transparency, thank you.
Catherine has the, I mean, like, the slides here, and like, on social media, I've been posting individual slides.
Brave.
I know it, right? It does open me up.
All right, thank you.
Any discussion?
One thing Mr. Mayor, I want to point out is a city like Fort Lauderdale has been taking $20 million out of their stormwater assessment and putting it in to lower their taxes, which is actually a false way of doing it, and it's going to come back and bite them. And their taxes are going to raise significantly in years in the future.
We don't want to get bit, do we, Mayor?
I don't anymore.
No other comments?
Yeah, Vice Mayor, so we're going to be considering 3 resolutions and an ordinance. We'll take them one at a time.
Okay.
There'll be a public hearing right after I read these, if anyone would like to speak about them. We'll start with Resolution 2018-38. And for those, if they want to speak, this is only involving the special assessment for fire service. This is a resolution of the City of Coral Springs, Florida, relating to the provision of fire services, facilities, and programs in the City of Coral Springs, Florida. Approving the assessment rate for fire services, imposing a fire services assessment against assessed property located within the City of Coral Springs for the fiscal year beginning on October 1st, 2018. Approving the assessment roll, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, providing for an effective date. This is a request, Vice Mayor, to open up the public hearing and to adopt.
Any discussion?
Public, if there aren't any, then you can take a motion.
Anybody want to speak from the public? Take a vote, all in favor?
But we need a motion.
Aye.
We have a motion first and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Move the second, any discussion on it? Okay, let's vote on it. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Unanimous?
The next one is Resolution 2018-037, a resolution of the City of Coral Springs, Florida, relating to the provision of solid waste collection services in the City of Coral Springs, Florida. Approving the assessment rate for solid waste collection services, imposing a solid waste collection assessment against assessed property located within the City of Coral Springs for the calendar year beginning on January 1st, 2019. Approving the assessment roll, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, providing for an effective date. This is a request to hold a public hearing and to adopt. So, if any members of the public would like to speak, this is the time. And
Any discussion? Anybody from the public want to say anything about it? Any discussion up here? Entertain a motion?
Approve.
Second.
Move the second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
it's approved. It's approved unanimously.
Okay.
And so now we're on item 4, which is the resolution 2018-036. This is the tentative millage rate. That's what Mr. Warren Gillis was addressing, so we'll make sure his comments are in the appropriate area in the minutes. And this is a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Coral Springs establishing a tentative millage rate of 5.8732 to balance the general fund for fiscal year 2018-19, which is $0.3366 or 6.08% more than the rollback rate, establishing a tentative general obligation debt millage rate of $0.2652, establishing the rollback rate to be $5.5366, and establishing Thursday, September 20th, 2018, as the date that a final public hearing will be held at 6:30 p.m. at the City of Coral Springs City Hall, 9500 West Sample Road, providing for an effective date. And this is a request to hold a public hearing and adopt. Before we hold that hearing, I want to walk through so it's very clear under the state law what we're doing. Again, we're establishing the rollback operating millage rate of 5.5366 mils, establishing the proposed operating millage rate of 5.8732 mils. That's 0.0 mils or 0% more than the current rate of 5.8732, and it is .3366 mils, or 6.08% more than the rollback rate of 5.5366. We're establishing the voter-approved debt millage rate of .2652 mils, which is 3.7% less than the current rate of .2753. We're establishing the required tentative budget hearing. We're having one tonight, September 12th, at 5:15, and then we're establishing the final budget hearing rate date on Thursday, September 20, 2018, at 6:30 p.m. in these chambers. We're authorizing the appropriate legal ads to be done on about September 2nd and September 16, 2018, addressing the final budget hearing on Thursday, September 20th, 6:30 p.m. So if we open that up to the public, see if anyone wants to speak.
Anyone from the public want to talk on this? No?
Closed. Take a motion.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the move, on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passed unanimous.
That went about 2.5 hours quicker than last year, just as a historical note. Next up is ordinance 2018-117. In ordinance of the City Commission of the City of Coral Springs, Florida, finalizing and adopting the annual operating budget and capital improvement program for fiscal year 2018-19. Reviewed, modified, and approved by the City Commission at meetings held on July 25th, September 12th, 2018, and September 20th, 2018, which includes the budget for the general fund, water and sewer, fire, solid waste, charter school, public art, debt service, health and liability, equipment services, tree trust funds, and capital improvement program funds. Providing that in the event of variation from the total budget is or becomes necessary, this ordinance shall be amended only by a subsequent ordinance consistent with Chapter 166 Florida statutes, the Charter and the Code of Ordinances of the City of Coral Springs, Florida, providing for severability, providing for conflict, providing for an effective date. This is a request to also hold a public hearing, approve, and set second reading for that September 20th, 2018 at 6:30 p.m.
Anybody from the public would like to speak about it? I'll entertain a motion.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimous. It.
Can we just remind the residents of two things going on this Saturday?
Yeah, we want to comment. You want to start, Mayor? Would you like to?
We
do
don't have,
comment?
there's no comments, it's just, that's me. Just
Okay.
remind them this Saturday.
Anybody have any announcements they want to make? Okay. I got a little thing here that, we're going to be having a gun buyback this weekend. I believe it's in the,
Garage.
it's in the parking garage, right? Yeah. So join your neighbors and police officers for coffee. Cop's going to buy you coffee. You got to come out. What?
That's different than the guns,
Oh, wait a minute.
separate.
Okay, got to hand it to me one at a time. Okay. Anyway, yeah, the gun buyback is this Saturday. What are the hours? 9 to 3. Right in the parking garage, so please come on out, and we're not trying to take your guns away from you, from what I've been accused of. It's if you have a gun that you want to do away with, you don't know what to do with it, you bring it to the police department, and I believe they're going to give a gift certificate of some sort? Gift card. Okay. Now, the second thing is coffee with a cop. Join our neighbors and police officers for coffee and conversation. Rise Biscuits and Donuts, or at 2764 North University Drive. That's in the walk. It's about 3 doors from the fountain. If you're looking at the fountain, it's to your right. No agenda or speeches. Just come out and have a good time. Anybody else have anything they want to say? This meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.